Hicks is a guy that we're going to come in about 3 years to be like, he's the new rock. I think Justin Reed stays long term, but if he doesn't, Hicks is the new rock that you're going to send. And God forbid they let him line up in the nickel. I'm going to tell you this. If you're a defensive coordinator out there, you see Hicks in the nickel, he's coming. Okay. So that's what's going on. And I'm here for it. I don't think we've seen anybody blitz as well or will be able to as well or hit as hard since Tyron was just blazing with his feet on fire. So I am all for seeing him do what he does.
Like that.
Yeah, then you speak about Hicks specifically and the versatility of the entire back end of the secondary at this point because of the pieces that obviously Brett Veach has given Dave Merritt and Steve Spagnuolo to work with. In your ideal rotation of the scenario right now, does that safety room look like? Obviously, Justin Reed is going to be a starter. We heard good things about Brian Cook coming back from the injury. Shamari Conner being in the slot. Where do you feel like that rotation allows Hicks to get in for year one? Moving forward, obviously, will be a different question mark. But where do you think Jaden can have an immediate impact on this team?
You know, that is a great question. And it's whether – I think the whole key is whether they really, really, truly stay with Shamari in the slot. I don't think that's sold. Like, I think they want it to be that way. But when rubber hits the road and we get into preseason games, and it's going to be, can we really go get that? And so I think there's still an adjustment period there that we have to watch and make sure that it is what we think it is. But after that, I think it becomes he's there solidly. It allows Trent to do what he does. I think the question is going to be, is Najee fully recovered? Because Najee Johnson has a chance to beat out both Jalen Watson and Josh Williams on the outside. And if that's that, then Shamari can stay there. And if so, then what I think by probably the bye, maybe a little bit after, I think Jaden Hicks is solidly your third safety. And he's coming in and he's making plays. I don't see Trey Dean or Dean Bush keeping him off the field if Shamari is in the nickel.
I definitely agree from that standpoint as well. So a little bit on to the later round picks as well. Two guys, offensive line, obviously with Nick Allegretti moving on, who was a key piece of this team from a depth perspective and obviously stepping up into a starting role in the playoffs after Joe Thuney went down. Talk to us about C.J. Anson and Hunter Norzad. Where do you think about these players before the draft? How you felt about them? How do you feel about them developing under Andy Heck as far as their system fit is concerned? And obviously with Joe Thuney's age, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith coming up on contract years, where do they fit into the future plans of this team?
Let me start with a personal grudge. And I don't care where you went to school. I'm happy you got to a league that plays the Ivy League and that kind of stuff. But CJ, you got to cut your hair, dude. Okay, that's what it comes down to. I am not here for it. I mean, let's be real. But CJ is a guy that is Andy Heck's type, right? He's got great feet. He moves really well in short spaces. And I think once he turns the corner and gets out in space, especially on screens, I think he's a guy that can make the difference with probably a year's tutelage. I don't think he can walk in, and if Joe Thuney doesn't feel like he can start week one, I don't think you can plug C.J. Hansen in there. I'm not trying to say that. But I do think a year in the system, maybe a little bit longer, I think he's a guy whose athleticism catches up to his level of competition deficit against guys in the league. So it may take a little bit, but I think he'll get there. And I think he can rely on that athleticism to carry him through and be, honestly, better in space than Nick Allegretti was coming out. And Nick got better as time went on. I don't think he's full on Eric Fisher, to tell you the truth. He's not Mitch Morse, but he's certainly an interior player that I think can do everything that you want from a pass block perspective and getting in space in the screen game. He's got to get stronger. He's got to be able to manage while he's blocking downfield. He disengages from combo blocks and gets to the second level pretty well, at least on film at his level of competition. But I do think that will be a little bit of a jump for him. And Norzad, I think, man, he reminds me of Bakhtiari, to tell you the truth. Like, he's just kind of like super dense muscularly. Like, you're not going to push him around because he just couldn't care less. He'll anchor on you, and there's no chance. So, like, I think, again, there'll be an adjustment period. But when you're playing behind Creed and you're learning the calls, and I do think he is a center first. He could probably be a swing interior guy, but I do think he is center first. I'm really hoping that he can grow into a role where he gets a little bit of time from time to time. Like that week 17, I think, is where you're going to see Norzad really shine.
So another thing that Beach is increasingly getting better at is these undrafted free agents. We got some great names in there. Do you see anybody sticking? I know it was a fullback in there too. I know how you get around fullbacks.
Hey, certain things just make me happy. But I will say this, Carson Steele can run the ball too. He had over 800 yards as a tailback at UCLA last year. Now, he ain't fast. He ain't running away from anybody. But as much as I like Mike Burton, and Mike's been on the show a lot, and he'll even tell you he's not going to run away from people either. It's about what you do at contact, and I like what Carson Steele does. So I'm hopeful that, hey, there's maybe not as much talent at the running back spot. Maybe you could squeeze him on. Like, I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed. But the guy that stands out to me isn't really an undrafted free agent. He's a guy that's getting a second chance or a third chance, if you want to be real. This is the system that I always felt Kelvin Joseph fit. And I think he's been misplayed to this point in his pro career. He's got the length and the aggressiveness and honestly, the goldfish attitude that he's just going to keep after you. And I'm glad to see what we saw in OTAs was him not being beaten down by his previous stops in the league so far. So I'm hoping it's like a resurgence for him. And I think he's a guy that could be a reserve that if he got pressed into action can give you like a breezy kind of attitude and really lift the edge that the secondary plays with if he gets pressed into action.
Interesting. So just to kind of get into it a little bit as far as that scheme is concerned, where do you think that Kelvin Joseph's previous stops have kind of limited him from that standpoint, and where do you think he needs to be transitioned in? Obviously, more physical on the line, I assume outside as well, beating up on the line of scrimmage from that standpoint.
He was asked to give half turn too much cushion and wait on guys to eat it up, and that's just not him. He needs to be in your face from the get-go, right? They asked him to play in the slot some, and that's just not his thing either. Honestly, if he's not going to be an outside, like use the boundary and just manhandle dudes into it, he needs to be maybe transition to kind of a free-floating robber safety kind of thing. Like that's where his hybrid is for me. And I think that might be really interesting, especially because if Hicks does take the third safety role, he is more of a like get down in the box and get dirty kind of dude, right? Like he's not so much the robber as much as Chamari was or Honey Badger was. Like, so, but I do think Kelvin can play in space like that and has enough recognition to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so we covered that draft. Sophomore slump. Do you see any potentially, or do you see just a growth period?
I mean, man, I got to tell you, I'm really, really happy that BJ Thompson's okay, but I was looking for him to take a big step forward. I was looking for him to come off the edge and push Felix. That's what I was hoping for. And so maybe that's a little bit out the window now. I'm glad he's good. We'll see what his career becomes, right?
Right.
But as far as a slump goes, I really don't see many guys that are going to take a slump. Coburn, obviously, long gone on somebody else's practice squad. I think it's Tennessee. I don't know. I'm still pissed off that they went with him instead of Moro Ojomo, who I thought was the better Texas tackle coming out, but whatever. It is what it is. I'm really excited to see what Nick Jones does. He's in a battle to be the backup as the nickel guy, right? Especially if Nazi stays outside. I thought Nick was right up their alley too. Physical, really aggressive dude, and I think he fits the scheme, but we didn't get to see him much, and I'm not sure what the disconnect was there. If it was just a leverage issue, because he's a little bit on the smaller side, but I'm looking for him to take a step forward. Really hoping that Felix can take a step forward. And the only guy that I think is in danger of taking a step back, but I wouldn't call it a sophomore slump, is Wanye, because I think Kingsley's going to be a battle. And I think they're pretty evenly matched, but they have different strengths. And so what I'm looking at it is we had hoped Joe would play last year, right? Then we hope Joe would be at OTAs, and no Joe. Now they're saying Joe will be at training camp, but not day one, right? So if Joe needs a little bit of time, I want to see Wanye in a guard. And I want to see him and Kingsley. I don't care that they're both young. I want to see the left side just be young and aggressive and see what he can do inside. And that might be the way to unlock him. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him.
So would you call what's the kid from Green Bay? Makarari? I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm not good with names, Ryan.
That's cool.
He's hurt. often, a lot. He's hurt constantly. Would you call him, or does that scare you?
I'd
It
call him. I
scares
just
me a
wouldn't pay
little.
him.
Definitely
Yeah.
didn't pay.
Yeah.
I expect him to get paid by somebody too. Like somebody's just going to give him money, I guess. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole organization that'll pretty much do what Aaron Rodgers says, right? So, do you think anything else is going to happen? I don't know.
Why not just bring in the fourth tackle just to make me mad that Olu's not going to be starting for no reason?
I know, right? Yeah, I'm with you.
I love Olu. So I'm glad that you mentioned BJ Thompson because I agree with you. I really wanted to see him take another step, and I do hope that he is healthy and he can, his career can progress because I felt like he's a unique talent as far as the speed off the edge to actually be able to bend that edge really, and he also gives you versatility as far as spot dropping, which we know Spags loves to do with guys that actually can't do that. As much as we've seen George Karlaftis chasing guys down for God knows what reason. I'm glad that you mentioned BJ Thompson because I've always loved BJ Thompson. So going into training camp, now that we talk a little bit about those position battles, and obviously DBs is going to be a huge one with outside with Watson and Williams, obviously Najee Johnson, Nick Jones in the slot battling Shamari Connor theoretically to see where everybody falls out. Obviously Kingsley versus Wanya at left tackle. Third running back spot is going to be fascinating. When you talk about going into camp a little bit later after that first preseason game, where are your eyes going to be trained as far as the battle is concerned to see where things are falling out?
First will be the DBs because they're going to run everybody through, but they're not going to be able, I think, to get everybody enough reps against ones that they're going to feel comfortable, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to evaluate on the plane home, who do we give reps with the ones to tomorrow? That change will be key because that'll tell you that they saw enough on film that he needs more. And so that will be a very good step forward. I'm hoping that's Najee Johnson, and I'm hoping that that's the way that it goes because I was really happy with the progress he made last year. After that, I think running back's a perfectly good spot to start. I'm going to be a little bit more keyed up to see who's like the fifth receiver onto the field because, I mean, there's 9 guys that can make this roster. And unlike last year, they can't afford to keep 7. It's going to be 6, and that's all they can have. And so that battle is going to be really heating up, and it might be week to week. I don't know.
That's true. Are you keeping 4 tight ends?
It depends if you count Carson Steele or not.
I'm excited about Wiley. I'm excited about Gray. I want to see what Irv Smith brings. It's a lot of talent in that room.
Yeah, so that'd be my question. What do you need to see from Irv maybe differently than what you've seen in other stops to have him, justify being on this roster?
He should get reps with the ones because they got to find this out too. But I got to see him be able to break down the defender. And while he's a great athlete, I'm not sure that he's always been aware, particularly in zone, where the pressure's coming from and what he has to do to make the adjustment. Now, I think depending on the schedule, there might be a couple backers they try to man him up on, which I think he has the advantage on. So he has to take that opportunity to show what he can do, that he can make that last cut, get separation, and turn it upfield. It can't be, hey, I'm a great athlete and I'm getting depth or I'm getting to the spot in the zone that I need to be, and then I make a catch with no yak. I need to see your athleticism on display. And so yak's going to be the key for Irv, I think.
Got you. Who's a guy that week 1 we might not know, but week 12 we're looking like, where did this guy come from? And thank God we got him.
Right? I mean, unfortunately, we're talking about covering a team that's won back-to-back Super Bowls, right? So there's not many people we don't know. But the guy that I'm most excited about that nobody knows yet is another Florida State guy. His name's Lovett, and I think Joe Cullen loves him more than I do. So that might be him.
How did he go undrafted? Quickly. What happened?
I mean, consistency is an obstacle for him. He's going to have to get better at that. But the tools are all there. With this coaching, I think you can get that. But he's not a finished product by any means. So that makes a little bit of sense.
The fortunate thing is we know of a very toolsy defensive lineman that came to Kansas City and was able to, get that consistently worked out pretty well. So we'll see. And in the meantime, we'll have you go out there for 10 snaps and you have your inconsistently covered up from that standpoint as well. No, but definitely happy to have Lovett in camp. I think he make a push for this roster, even they brought everybody back for certain as well. So other kind of training camp storylines, Carson Wentz, new backup quarterback into camp, obviously in Kansas City. What do you think that he can bring from the standpoint that'll be different from what we've had, obviously, in Matt Moore and Blaine Gabbert last year, and, of course, Chad Henne?
I think it's the axe that he brings with him, because he's got an axe to grind, right? Like, ever since he got hurt and Nick had to finish out for him and then his stops along the way, like, people have forgotten that he's a very good quarterback when he's in the right system. And if there's any system that is better than Doug's, it's Andy's for him. So I don't see any scenario where you screw around and do something silly like put 2 quarterbacks on the field. But, if it gets to the point where they wrap up the first seed and it's, week 15, I would rest Patrick more than just that last volume. You know what I mean? I think Wentz is capable of moving this offense if you didn't have Mahomes. I think Andy's probably, from what I understand, they were interested in him a year prior to that. Blaine got here because Carson didn't want to come then. So that means something to me. The biggest question for me is, without Tommy Thompson's cannon anymore, is he going to be the holder that can spin out and throw some fake, make those special teams big plays? Because that's what I'm looking for. I don't know if he's going to get a whole lot of opportunity. So I'm here for any trick plays they want to put for Carson Wentz.
Look, they got to figure out if they trust Matt to hold now. So it'll be certainly interesting. Go ahead, Country.
I'm going to ask about this schedule. We play, 6 days out of the week? We play on Tuesday? Like, why? But how do you see that playing out? Is the rest like crazy? Because the days it's 4 days here, it's 6 days. It's just all over the place. How does the schedule play a part? And how big of a part does it play in trying to get to that 3?
I think there are definitely some quirks, but the advantage that they have is that they're going to have that extra 10 practices in training camp. And Andy always puts all the effort in training camp to have them prepared for the season, right? So during the year, the ones that are 4 days or 6 days, I think they'll be able to adjust because they'll have so many practices already in that I feel like they'll be more solid. It's that week around Christmas that it's 3 games in 10 days. That there's no way around. And those, I think, are going to be some good contests. At that point in the year, through attrition and wearing your body down, that's where I'm concerned. And I don't think there's anything you can do to prepare for that other than guys like Travis, maybe Chris. Probably that's going to be the limit of it. I don't know. Maybe Tooney, depending on how he's doing. I could see them maybe getting some practices off where we go in a short week and they're like, hey, we're just not making the older guys practice. I think that'll be smart. People probably get worried about it, but it won't bother me because I think they need the rest more than they need the practice.
Agreed.
That absolutely makes sense. And, for those who do not know, Ryan has a background as far as, sports science is concerned, obviously building out trainers for elite athletes as well. I'm interested in the sports medicine aspect of this. And so as you talk about a team that now obviously has gone on multiple championship runs, has this wealth of games that they have built up on their bodies and now having a little bit of a shorter turnaround than everybody else, and going through a stretch that you mentioned was going to be very difficult with the Texans, Browns, and Steelers, I think is that 3-game stretch and however many days it is. Beyond just the practices, do you think that there's a way to try and find rest for games at this point? Because it is a situation in which, because you're trying to have a unique accomplishment going for 3 straight titles, there may be a chance for possibly unique solutions that we haven't necessarily seen, especially now that the season is 1 game longer, technically on top of it.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that I'm really intrigued to see what they do this year. Because you're tempted to say, X team doesn't have a matchup that I'm really scared of. I mean, there's still no quarterback in Las Vegas, right? So are we really nervous about this? So, hey, Trav, take the week off. You're always tempted to do that, right? But it's still a league where anybody can beat anybody any day. And I truly believe that. And that's the scary part. So I'd like to see them do it with the practice schedule because I think that's more applicable, yet you can still have the performance. I would like to see guys like Travis and Chris be on a reduced pitch count when it comes to those games in particular. If Travis has to play a game where he only plays 30 snaps, he's still there. He's still there if you need him. If you dig yourself into a hole and you need him to get out of it, he's still there. But if you can take the load off of him, and I think Wiley's going to play an integral part in this offense, maybe not from the target aspect, but certainly just from the raw number of snaps that I hope they get him in for so that Travis can rest. I think it's going to take a transition. It might not happen till midseason, but that's really one of my bigger goals is to get exactly that, where he in particular can rest. But I also feel like we might see, I hope, more urgency than we've seen the last couple of seasons in the first 6 to 8 weeks, because they've gone out and they've made it so they can have their deep game again and they can push deep and have the speed that they want. They got to utilize it to their max. No drop in early games that you shouldn't be in. It's a tough enough schedule as it is. So if you have the advantage on paper, you need to put it up on the board too, so that when it gets, and maybe you can get a 3 or 4 game lead and you have 4 games less in the season, maybe you can hold some guys out down the stretch and get ready for hopefully a bye week and then into the playoffs. That's unfortunately at this point, multiple back-to-back 20-game seasons, right? You shouldn't count your chickens before they hatch, right? But you got to plan for when they're hens and you got to feed them. So there is a whole thing about getting to game 20, not just to game 12 or 17.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the good thing is that Veach has, proofed this roster in certain respects, bringing back defensive linemen, obviously bringing in Jared Wiley. Hopefully the ways to West, specifically the over 30, premier players in Chris Jones and Travis Kelce comes to fruition from that standpoint, that you don't necessarily have to play them as many snaps. It's not necessarily something that they wanted to happen, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world, in my opinion, that Travis Kelce and Chris Jones did not necessarily have a full allotment of snaps to start last year, that they had to be brought along a little bit slowly. Maybe that helped them down the stretch. And obviously we know Travis Kelce making the selfless decision to sit out that week 18 game was very important for him in the playoffs. He looked renewed. He looked refreshed. And I'm sure that helped for that aspect as well.
Yeah. Now, if he can just get off the Eras tour, I think we'll all be happier.
And sometimes you got to make the girlfriend happy. It is what it is.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The other question I did have, speaking again for something that you are working on over there at NFL33.com, covering the entire league over there with Daniel Harms, of course, a friend of Tell the Truth. We had him on during draft season as well.
Shout out, Danny. What's up, Danny?
Shout out to Harms Way, man. Looking at the league-wide landscape, and specifically as the Chiefs on top of that landscape, where do you see that next challenger or the number one contender that will be staring down the Chiefs as far as we get into January and saying this is the team? We've seen the churn that's happened, with Buffalo, Miami. So they've lost some premier players. Obviously, the Jets are trying to get Rodgers back and make a run. The Texans made some very aggressive moves to bring in veterans to make that next step. Obviously, we've seen the AFC North always do what they try to do, which is be the black and blue division to try and rough some people up. So from your perspective, who are those contenders that, by the time we get to playoff time, people are going to have their eye out as the guys that are going after the crown?
Well, I am really intrigued to see what all that speed in Miami is able to do, because the quarterback hasn't changed. And while he fits that system really well, I don't know that come January you see a different result, because I don't think it was just the cold. I think there was also the elevated defensive attention on the quarterback in Miami, I think, played a part in that. So that's one. But I think the really interesting thing is the team that I don't want to play in the playoffs is the team they have to open with, because skinny Lamar scares the crap out of me, because they're going to be able to do everything that they ever wanted, running the ball, motioning him off, getting him outside the pocket. He's going to be back to like the X factor guy that he was. He's a better passer than he was last time he used his legs like that. I just want to get through that game unscathed and worry about it later. Let somebody else try to rough them up. They're going to have to get run on quite a bit, I think, particularly from the Steelers, because Russ ain't getting you anywhere. So unless Justin Fields takes over, that's going to be a ground and pound and beat the – try not to cuss on here – a lot out of them. So I'm relying on the rest of you AFC North teams, please.
Absolutely. I was going to encourage you, but we are live with RGR, so I won't encourage you from doing so. No, I completely get it. And look, obviously the Chargers are the hot team during the summer that everybody likes to talk about because they hired Harbaugh. How do you feel about that individual kind of move from that standpoint? Do you think that's more of a future move to concern about, or do you think it can have year one ramifications that everybody expects to have a quick turnaround there?
They'll try to have year one ramifications. Teams will get caught off guard, maybe even early for the Chiefs. You never know. It's how you execute what is a much different style that can work, but it's not just Jim buying into it. It's the entire organization, and I'm not sure that they're there. In the end, you can't afford to waste a year of Justin Herbert. So I think in the end, they're not going to be able to stick with it as much as they want to. And if they play into what they're doing now, I do feel that this division is still owned by the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm not too nervous there. I think they'll make some headway and they'll bust some heads, maybe even give the Chiefs a problem a little bit, because we know Spags, he's not selling out to stop the run. But I don't think it's going to pay off for them year one. Now, if they double down and they get more and more into that, where they're running, jumbo sets all the time with full backfields, what's really going to make me angry is they're going to use more fullback than anybody else does, and that's just going to grind my gears. So maybe year 2 or 3 we'll worry about it more.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Country. If you got one last question, I know we said we're going
to. Oh man, I was. Is there any game that when you're reading the schedule, your eyes lit up and said, "Ooh, I don't want to be bothered. I'm watching this game."
I'm going to watch them all. I fear for Josh out in Buffalo. We'll see what they can become. So that wasn't the one, really. AFC West is AFC West. I do think, in his defense, I think Bo Nix has been criminally underrated to this point. I think he and Sean Payton will be a formidable pair. Probably not year one either, but I do think they will come together, and I do think eventually they'll be good. But it was the Ravens, and obviously I don't care whether it's the podcast hosts or the quarterback or the guy calling the games in the preseason. I don't like the Cincinnati Bengals, okay? So let's just do away with them and get it over with.
You're on the right podcast for that. You're on the right podcast for that. I agree.
Oh, man. Oh, wow. 30 minutes. It's not enough time with you, guys. Hey, all success, man. Like I said, you are one of the inspirations. You are one of the trailblazers. We respect the hell out of you, what you do, and the knowledge you bring to the game. You're a wonderful guy. Every time I reach out for advice, no matter how late it is,
I got you,
or how silly I feel the question is, you always get back with within a day or two. I can expect a response. So, hey man, we appreciate you, Ryan. You got a great following over there. You got a great channel, man, and we appreciate your knowledge. I got to get you on and tell the truth one day with D-Mac show.
Do that mostly. I can do that mostly.
Absolutely. No, look, it's great to talk with you, Ryan. I've been watching you for years, so I definitely appreciate being able to talk ball with you. Make sure you let everybody know where they can find you at, man, and we'll appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on again. I really do appreciate it. And if we want, we can maybe do it just for the season there after we get cut downs and we can start screaming at each other. It'll be great. You can find me on RGR Football here. Ryan Tracy NFL is the Twitter handle. That's got everything. NFL 33 is my newest thing. We're building a staff over there and we're covering stuff outside the Chiefs. So we get a look at what's coming, that kind of thing. And Locked On Chiefs is still my daily. So shout out to Dan Harms. He just joined the Draft Network as well. So you're going to see more content from Dan as well as RGR. So we're pretty excited about that. You guys are doing a hell of a job over here, and I'm happy to come on whenever you'll have me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I got to get on Dan because Dan really think he a chef or something. I don't know what's going on with Dan's Twitter right now.
Dan is the chef.
You got a chance to taste some of the stuff he be cooking up?
Yeah, he makes it. I'll eat it. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
I like that. I definitely got to get some pasta or something from Dan, man. Thank you, man. It's a blessing, man. We appreciate you greatly.
Yes, it's good to see you guys, and thanks for having me on.
All right, appreciate it.
Great to have you on, man. For Kingdom Cast,
it's great.
Country,
It's great.
Great guest, Ryan Tracy, man. Appreciate everybody for coming by, seeing us. Next time, man. Peace out. Go Chiefs.
Peace.